And hello, everyone. Welcome to Safer Social Media Show. Here on the Safer Social Media Show, we talk about how we as individuals can gain the ability to take a more critical look at what we see online and become more selective about how we use that information and how that can lead to freedom of disinformation. So I'm your host, Bridgetti Banda. I'm a global goodwill ambassador and a live streaming advocate. I started my career raising awareness about the water crisis in South Africa. I produce and host online shows and lead conversations with entrepreneurs and thought leaders. My amazing co-host is Allison Diamond. Allison is a sociologist and social media enthusiast. She's concerned about disinformation and malicious behavior, and that's why we decided to start the show. She takes a sociological approach to examining the problem and to find user-based solutions. So welcome to the show, Allison.
Thank you very much.
So pleased to have you here today. And our conversation today is a rather interesting one. We're talking about partisan journalism. Is it good or bad for society? Now, I guess it could possibly be a little bit of a controversial topic,
hmm
but let's kick that off with asking you if you could define what partisan media means.
Partisan media is when the political parties tend to kind of collaborate sometimes with news media outlets. And media outlets are sharply divided in the news that they're giving us. So, for example, in this country, we've got Republican versus Democrat, and you can hear entirely different versions of the same news event depending on which side you're seeing. So that is highly partisan media.
Right. Well, that's a great way to kick it off with. Could you give us three examples of how partisan journalism could benefit the public?
Well, there are people who believe that a partisan media ensures diversity. And that means that, just as one side can tell its own version of a story, so can the other side. So both have the freedom to provide its own, version and perspective. And then another point would be that a partisan press is seen as giving more information than an objective site would be, because the objective site is trying to be fair and balanced. And so
Right.
it may decide, there are certain types of news that isn't worth delving into. And so the partisan press gives more info, according to people who are, supportive of it. They are going to give the time to these issues that the objective media would not consider newsworthy. And both sides can do that. And of course, they will also dig into issues about their opponents that the objective media would not get into. The other thing is sensationalism. Partisan news sites can do that. Those outlets can be more sensational and more provocative.
Mm, mm. Yeah, absolutely. I can see how that happens and does happen, in fact. Now, I've got an interesting question for you. Since the advent of social media as we know it today, um, what qualifies as press? Because, we've got traditional media, there's so many different kinds of media. So, would you say it includes things like blogs and citizen journalism? Does that qualify as press?
Yeah, that's that's a
Is that
controversial
a tricky is
topic.
that a tricky question?
Yeah, and the thing about journalism, especially in the progressive era, and when really focused on professionalism and objectivity, we define professional journalism as an actual career with standards. There's a standard of ethics that journalists follow. There's repercussions for not following those standards. So plagiarism and faked sources, for example. There's standards that they live by. And when you come to blogs and citizen news, YouTube, for example, there are plenty of people who will give their report about local events or world events, but we don't
Right.
know where they're all getting their facts from. We don't know their ethics. And the other thing is that they don't have the breadth and the width of, the resources that major journalism sites have. So major media outlets have the money, they've got the personnel, they can be around the country, around the world, and they have much more access to information and of course those standards. And blogging, we don't know those people. We have to just kind of trust. And of course, people will argue that that's the case with partisan journalism. But
Mm.
comparing the two, there have never been any standards for blogs, no standards for even me. I can go on and create my own news site, and it's up to you whether you want to believe me or not. But what are my standards? What are
Mm.
my ethics? You don't know.
I think we've kind of reached a point where things are a little bit blurred and difficult because, both traditional media and citizen journalism, for want of a better word, both are filled with fake news.
Yeah.
The fact that you've got journalists who are accredited people who are supposed to be held up to a standard, a much higher standard, um, has also become a source of fake news and disinformation. So it's a very murky waters, for want of a better word.
Yeah, the problem that we have now with this partisan journalism is that you really don't know who to trust. The standard ethics, really, the standards of journalism have kind of been thrown out the window because both sides feel that the other side is being unfair. And the
Hmm.
conservatives in this country, for example, have long felt that there's a liberal bias to media outlets. And so, as soon as I think it was Ronald Reagan who revoked I think it was called the Fairness Act, but that act had required a balanced reporting in news. And once
Hmm.
that was revoked, the rise of conservative talk shows and Fox News about 10 years later. So all of these different voices came to the fore. And of course, people who like the diversity and like the new voices. Um,
Right.
Unfortunately, there's, like you said, a blurring of what's true and what's not.
Absolutely. Allison, tell me, would you say that anti-partisan journalism promotes objectivity or not?
Well, the anti-partisan um, supporters do believe that objectivity is a requirement for news. And so they see it as not putting a political spin on anything, not trying to bend the public in any one way or another. They want just the facts. And that's what progressive journalism and objective journalism was based on. They prided themselves on thorough investigation, accuracy. That was what journalists were seen as, just like the kindly father, like Walter Cronkite in this country. I don't know who might be the equivalent in South Africa where you are, but Walter Cronkite was like the epitome of that fatherly, trustworthy, unbiased news reporter. And
Mm.
I have to say that the funny thing about that is the news reporting that he did was very Anglo American. So it wasn't diverse at all. Even though it was
Mm.
objective, it was still, leaning towards that Anglo American bias. And yet we saw that as being objective. And so in hindsight, you can kind
Isn't
of see where the
hindsight a great
partisan
thing?
press. Yes. Yeah, in hindsight, you can kind of see that it's very hard to be objective.
Yeah, yeah. And so, from a public perspective, what would you say are the key consequences of partisan journalism versus anti-partisan journalism?
With partisan news, there's this idea that consumers can choose what they want to read, and so they can get their full perspective from either side. They're going to educate themselves. They don't have to worry because the right is going to say they're on the right, the left is going to say they're on the left, so you know what you're getting. But the
Right.
problem with that is that a lot of people are not looking at both sides. And Facebook is part of that problem because they kind of created that echo chamber with their news feeds and related videos that are linking one after another. And so they kind of, narrow us into this channel where what we're
Right.
seeing is the same kind of stuff from different outlets over and over and over again. And so you don't want to blame Facebook for everything, but they did kind of set the standard for consuming media and news content. And that echo chamber is real. It doesn't give people a real opportunity unless you're, going to leave the site or make some real changes on your own to see the other side. We're comfortable seeing what Facebook is sending to us because we have our settings and our keywords, and Facebook has read those and is delivering to us what they think we're going to like.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, so that's one major issue, I would say. I mean, there are others, but that's the major concern, that we aren't as educated as we used to be. We're not getting a full worldview, and we're also being inundated with minutia. As long as it makes the other side look bad, it's worth reporting in a partisan press. And so, somebody wears, like Obama, he wore a tan suit, that became news. you know, Donald
Crazy, isn't
Trump.
it?
Yeah, I mean, Donald Trump has toilet paper streaming from his foot as he goes to to board his flight. That became news because it's any bit of minutia that you never would have seen before. That would have been so, just blatantly rude and unprofessional. It would have taken the polish off of journalism, and now anything goes, it seems.
I know. It's crazy. Sometimes you really have to shake your head when you see the kind of things that makes news headlines, and sometimes I see people saying, and how is this news? It
Yeah,
seems, they push things simply for ratings, for the sake of ratings, not for the
exactly.
sake of correctness or newsworthiness. It just seems that we've created this beast, this culture of ratings at all cost, almost.
Yes.
So people will create news, or they'll create drama so that they can rank on the Twitter feed or something. You know,
Right.
it's all about your coverage. So,
Yes.
how did we create this beast that we now cannot tame, it would seem?
Yeah, it's hard to know if we could put that genie back in the bottle. We did it once before, but that was during a time in our political, I'm not talking about the United States, of course, but that was during a time when we were, we just had similar beliefs on both sides, so we were more supportive. And, when that short time period ended, we did kind of go back into this partisanship. So maybe when there's I mean, I hate to speculate on a war or something that's horrible, but when something huge affects all of us in the same way, that there's the metaphor, or the analogy of the alien spaceship coming, and the
Yes,
whole world is impacted by it. So all of a sudden we see value in working together. It's something
right.
big. You would think it would be climate change or something, but that's not working. So, but apparently, if we are going to put that genie back in the bottle, it's going to be because we all see a common purpose or a common goal, and we see value
Mm.
in working together. Right now, we just don't have that.
I know. I don't know what the answer is, but what I do know is that it's a good thing that we're starting this conversation. We need to engage with one another. We need to find a solution. We won't get to a constructive solution unless we have the conversation and we talk about the difficult stuff, right?
Yeah, that's right. We want to continue this discussion on Twitter tomorrow. Our weekly Twitter chat begins at the same time every Thursday, and that's 12:30 p.m. Pacific. And let's see, 3:30, I think it is, Eastern, and 7:30 UTC and Johannesburg time. It's 9:30 p.m.
Yes, that's correct. So, in summary, can I ask you, what would you say are three factors by which we as individuals can identify honest journalism?
Whew.
Is
Yeah,
that a
that's
million-dollar question?
yeah, it is. Gosh, I mean, it's terrible that we have to fact check all the time, but I guess the best thing to do is to look at their bio and see what they state their standards are. Do they have any standards listed? You know, I guess you'd have to probably. I mean, what I would do is I would take a good look at their the articles that they put out, or the whatever form of content they put out, what they're reporting on, what they're not reporting on. Are they fair? Are they biased? I would also look at a site, a fact checker site, more than one, to see where they stand. There's a media bias chart. I would look at that. Um, there's just, with journalism breaking down the way it is, it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to distinguish. But
Right.
I think there's good media organizations out there, but we have to be on our toes.
Absolutely. And I think, we need to see this shift from the culture of liking and sharing to a culture of fact checking before we hit the like and share button. We need to turn that whole culture on its head. And again, I'm going to put it out there because it is what it is. That was a monster that was created by Facebook.
Yeah,
They created this monster of like and share where people don't even take 2 seconds to think about something. They see something that looks horrific, looks sensational, looks like it could get a lot of, likes and shares and whatever, and they go in and they hit the button without
yeah.
taking a step back to fact check. And I think that's what we want to emphasize is take a second, take a breath before you hit the share button and go
Can
and
I
do some fact checking.
can I give you one little story?
Yeah, sure.
On Facebook, there's a story circulating that President Trump, when he went to Japan on Memorial Day, he wished the Japanese Happy Memorial Day, and that went around. Anti-Trump people were, laughing. Why would you tell the Japanese Happy Memorial Day? And the actual true story is that he told our troops stationed in Japan Happy Memorial Day. Now it's a little questionable whether you should ever say Happy Memorial Day when you're commemorating,
Right.
fallen soldiers. But I had to tell a few people, you're circulating something that's not true, and the common response I got was either so what, or are you a Trump supporter? And that's what's happened today. If you support the other side just because you want to make sure that what they're posting is true, you're the enemy. So
Right.
that's a consequence. That's a huge consequence of this whole partisan news. If you don't support the news, you may be biased depending on what it is that you're supporting. And what I support is the truth. You know, it may not be pretty, but I support the truth.
Well, I think that is our take home for today is, we need to be more conscientious about our quest for the truth, and not be so quick on the button.
Yeah,
Go and do a bit of research before you share because, and think about for me, it's about thinking about the consequences. If you don't, the consequences of disinformation, the consequences of fake news, um, can be severe as leading to someone committing suicide. It has happened. It does happen.
hmm,
So if not, is it in view of that risk? Is it not better to take a breath and do some fact checking before you share disinformation?
yep, I agree totally.
Allison, thank you so much. This was fantastic. And I really look forward to our show again next week. I want to say a huge big thank you to everyone who's joined us today, and also invitation again to join us on the Twitter chat. And we look forward to seeing you all again soon. So from me, Bridgetti and Banda, it's goodbye for now. Take care, Allison.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.